He says, ologies of food. Season that opens the
So I went and found a different translation this week because this one matches what I remembered as a kid, or at least a little closer. So I thought I'd go find another translation. There's, of course, lots of translations to Scripture, so you can find one that puts the wording in the way you remember it.
That hand satisfies a gyre, very living thing.
Okay. Well, as we begin tonight, I've got a scripture passage, and I'll tell you when I finish, I'll tell you why I love scripture passages like this. So this is from Mark. Here's Zach finally. Give him a hard time when he comes in. It's my nephew. You can pick on him. This is from Mark chapter 7. And he called the people to him again and said to them, "Hear me, all of you, and understand. There's nothing outside a person that by going into him can defile him, but the things that come out of a person are what defile him." And when he had entered the house and left the people, his disciples asked him about the parable. And he said to them, "But are you also without understanding? Do you not see that whatever goes into a person from outside cannot defile him, since it enters not his heart but his stomach and is expelled? Thus he declared all foods clean." And so I love scripture like this because it was a couple months ago, and I remember hearing a podcast about kind of our digestive system, and that our digestive system is actually considered outside of our body because it's a closed system. It's meant that stuff doesn't pass through it unless our body wants those things to pass through. And so so then I read scripture like this and I think, I mean, this is Jesus, but I'm thinking, like, here's people that didn't have the science, but yet they describe something in scripture that actually makes sense in human biology. And this isn't the only place in scripture that stuff like that happens. And maybe it's just me drawing really loose lines. But I like that from the standpoint of, so the rabbit hole I'll go down before I get too far tonight is, so your digestive system is meant to be a closed system. The problem that we have is there are lots of foods that we eat that cause gut permeability. That's the big word of it. And when we have gut permeability, then stuff that's not supposed to pass through that closed system passes into our system. And that can be sometimes where you get autoimmune diseases. You can get some of the other stuff that can happen because stuff's leaching into your body that's not supposed to be there. So that's kind of there's my first rabbit hole of the night. So, and we'll blame it on scripture. So, but I think one of the things that, we can think about scripture is, Jesus is trying to say is that, what comes out of your heart is really, in a sense, who you are, what you're about, not the things that are coming in from the outside. It's the things, it's how you deal with those things. It's how you talk about those things. It's how you interact with the world. That's the true kind of measure of who you are. And I like that from the standpoint, one of the phrases that I always kind of get stuck on, and I think this kind of fits in this situation as well, is, when somebody says, "Well, the devil made me do it," well, I always say that's a cop-out. It's like, you wanted to do it, and you just use the devil as your scapegoat, So I think in some ways this kind of fits that piece too. And not to say that the devil doesn't have influence on us, not to say that there isn't evil in the world, but I also think we sometimes too quickly jump to using that kind of scapegoat. So this might be a good reminder for all of us, if you've spent too much time on social media lately, is that it's not the things outside of you that defile you, it's what's coming from your heart. So be careful of what you're digesting, I guess, in the world. Let's begin with a word of prayer tonight. Gracious God, we thank you for calling us together again this evening to continue to dive into what does it mean to be, what does it mean to think about food in different ways in our world, the way we interact with food, the way we think about food. Help us to see you in the many things that we do and see and hear each day, and help us to follow you in the things that we do. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So I'm going to start with, I'm going to start with this cartoon just because lots of people have experienced this, and in the room you might have a hard time reading that. On your screens at home you probably can read that, but it says you went on low carb, lost 90 pounds, lowered your cholesterol, cured your high blood pressure, and now you're walking 5 miles a day. But I'm warning you, a low carb diet is bad for your health. And there are doctors out there that will say that, so including my own, but that's another story. So actually I told you that story last week. So I just want us to start thinking about, what I want us to start thinking about tonight is to think about some of what we've learned kind of historically about some of the topics we're going to talk about. So we're going to do the next couple slides. We're going to do some kind of free association. If you all know what free association is, you see a picture and what comes to mind. Okay, free association. So we're going to start here. And don't bother my little slide subtitle. I guess I could play this and then you wouldn't have to see where I decided not to follow the rules of how you put a presentation together. So when you see this, what do you think?
Cocaine.
Cocaine. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Calories, okay.
Sweet.
Dessert, sweet, okay.
Cheap.
Refined sugar, yep. Good. Okay. No, this is free association. You can think whatever you want. Yeah.
Cheap.
Cheap?
Yep.
Yeah.
Cheap.
What else do you think when you see that? Oh, it can be. Depends on what kind of sugar you buy. It can be expensive. Yeah. Yeah. You're covered. Oh, you're covered. It's in your cupboard, right? Yeah. Yeah. You know, if you throw anyone a pantry shower, one of the things you're going to buy them is you're going to buy them some sugar. You know, it's just kind of, we call those staples, you know, in our world. Yeah. Okay. So I kind of mentioned this last year, and I apologize that this is in kilograms because this is the one I found, and then I didn't spend the time to convert kilograms to pounds.
Whoa.
I don't know, what's that?
Oh, sorry. I'm on my phone doing my homework and listening, and I didn't mute it again. I'm sorry.
Okay, Zach.
Sorry.
Do your homework, Zach.
I am.
Okay. So, you know, we talked about this last week, though, right? I said in 1776, the other data that I had seen, we were eating about 4 pounds of sugar a year. And, you know, in 2009, or maybe even later than that, we were up probably over 200 pounds of sugar a person a year. And, you know, if you just start looking at, this might be a problem. Okay, it's probably not, might be a problem. This is a problem with just how much sugar we consume. And a lot of that, you know, is that there are so many things that sugar is in. It's got lots of different names. Like I said last week, I was going to bring you the graphic of all the different names of sugar, which I forgot to do, but I'll try to do that for next week.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you have one? Yeah, there's a ton of different names of sugar, and you have to be a detective if you're going to buy anything from the center aisles of the grocery store. You have to be a detective if you want to find stuff that doesn't have a lot of sugar in it, because there's just so many different names for sugar. The other, of course, problem with that is, like I said last week, they even got the term natural flavorings passed as one way that they can sneak sugar into things. That's not okay, in my opinion. But you just have to be a detective. If you're gonna buy stuff that's kind of pre-made, you got to be a detective about what's actually in it.
OSE. Oh.
Yeah, I passed out a sheet, I think a year ago or something, or at something else, and there were 61 different names of sugar, and I memorize them when you shop. Yeah, right, right. I mean, actually, one of the easiest ways to shop is just to stay out of the center aisles, and then if it has to have a food label, then just don't buy it, and then you solve the problem.
Did you see what Peter posted?
Oh, I didn't see what Peter posted.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it ends in OSE, it's sugar.
OSE. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Peter, for that. Yeah, that's one of the simpler ways to be able to pick that up. Okay, so we're gonna move on to another one. The other thing about sugar, and I think this is just one of those things to remember, is you're all old enough to remember they used to call type 2 diabetes sugar diabetes, right? Y'all remember that? Yeah, that's what they called it. And at some point, they changed it to type 2 diabetes or whatever because it made sugar look bad. If it says if it says what the problem is right in the name, not to say that it's all sugar's fault, but sugar plays a big part of that. So what do you think when you see this? More flavor, yeah. This can be high flavoring for Scandinavians right here. You get salt and pepper, and you go much farther than that, and you're being outrageous. Yeah.
When you see salt.
I cheated a little bit about this because I would actually encourage you not to eat this kind of salt. And there's a reason why, because they actually bleach this to make it nice and white. And there's also stuff that they put in there to keep it from caking together, which isn't necessarily really good for you either. So salt's a kind of a big topic, and you can spend a lot of time learning about salt. There's, some people, some of you maybe have switched to sea salt at home. There's some people who say sea salt's not even the best because there's so much plastic in the oceans that when they make sea salt, they dry out, salt water, that you end up with some of that plastic in your salt. I don't want to sound like a commercial, but there's a ton of people that I follow that they all believe in, and this is actually what I eat at home. It's called Redmond Real Salt. It's from salt mines in Utah. So it's a U.S. product, but it's got kind of the full mineral complement to it too. So it's got pink crystals and brown crystals and black crystals and kind of, because it's.
Where do you find it?
I usually buy it on Amazon, which I probably shouldn't, but I would bet you there's other places. I bet you there are some stores that have them. You can buy it straight from them, I think, too.
What's it called again?
Redmond Real Salt.
Fred Meyer carries it now in their nutrition center.
See, Zach works at Fred Meyer. That's why.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, and like a lot of things, you can probably, there's different places you can find in a bigger package where you're not going to pay as much for it. But I use my, and you have to be careful with Himalayan salt because it's not really tightly regulated. And so there's some of it that could just be dyed sea salt. So, they can call it whatever they want to, but that's kind of one of the marketing packaging problems we have. Yeah. It's a long ways to haul salt. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think kosher salt is fine too, as far as I know. I just, like I said, I just know Morton. I guess I don't know that about kosher salt. Did they bleach kosher salt? Does anybody know that? It doesn't have iodine in it. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about Redmond's. Redmond's does have iodine in it, so you do have to be a little bit careful as well because there is iodine in Morton salt, and that's kind of part of what they said, or kind of how they got started. It's how it's packaged. Yeah.
You know what I think of?
What?
Killing slugs with salt.
Killing slugs with salt.
Oh.
Well, and here's the thing about salt, and I'd really encourage you to kind of do some of your own reading on salt. salt has gotten such a bad name in society, and salt's actually way more important than we realize. Salt can actually help with decreasing sugar cravings, which is interesting. Salt, now I'm going to forget all my different functions. So one of the myths that you've been told forever is if you eat too much salt, your blood pressure goes up. And that's a myth. And actually it's a myth because it's the other white substance that gets your blood pressure to go up, sugar, that I showed you first. So we blame salt for what the sugar does quite often. So there is evidence that if you reduce your salt, you can reduce your blood pressure, but at the same time, you will raise your heart rate, which is not positive. It's not a positive outcome. You want your heart rate and your blood pressure lower. So you don't want one to compensate for the other by how you mess around with salt. You know, most of you know, if you were ever an athlete or anything like that, you get cramps, or you're just somebody now that you get cramps in your life. It's salt, but the important thing, and we weren't going to talk about that too much tonight, but the other thing you have to watch out for is magnesium. Because magnesium, our soil, and most of our soil is so depleted in magnesium, we're not getting a lot of magnesium from the natural sources that we used to get it from. And the more sugar you eat, the more it actually depletes your body of magnesium. So it's kind of, and magnesium, like there's like 600 processes in your body that magnesium works on. So it's kind of one of those things. Some doctors, if you have migraine headaches, the first thing they'll tell you is to try to take magnesium. So that's just kind of, I'll talk about that more in a different session, but that's kind of important to know too. And magnesium will also helps to regulate how much salt you keep in your body. And they all kind of work together with potassium. There's a fourth one too, but what am I forgetting? That work together.
Is it okay to ask a question?
Yeah, ask a question.
So what kind of, I like monk fruit, but what kind of sugar substitute or what kind do you like?
You know, I don't use a lot anymore. I have used monk fruit. I use erythritol sometimes. I eat a lot of plain Greek yogurt, and you got to do something to it or else it's really tart. So I put a few drops of stevia in that. I've got some stevia with that has vanilla in it, and it actually makes it taste pretty good. The thing with all of the artificial sweeteners, like those kind of, I would call them the better of the artificial sweeteners. There's the bad artificial, and then there's the better of the artificial sweeteners. Is you have to figure out how it affects your body. Some people will eat them and they'll crave real sugar more. Like it kind of causes, even though it's not sugar, it'll cause them to crave real sugar. So you kind of just have to figure out for yourself to say, this one doesn't seem to bother me. I don't have any ill effects. Some of them, people have digestive issues where they'll get gassy or different stuff because of the artificial sweetener. So you kind of have to, it's kind of one of those things you just figure out what works for you. And it really is kind of different from person to person of kind of what's effective. The other thing is you got to really pay attention to what your what the measurements are. Like stevia is something that you put like drops of it in something, and it's like literally just little drops. You know, where some they might say, you know, 3/4 of a cup of this is about equivalent to a cup of sugar, or vice. You know, so you have to kind of read the labels or know your products so you know you don't make something that tastes too sweet. Usually, one of the other complaints people often have about some of the artificial sweeteners in that sense is that they give your mouth like a cooling effect. Like it like makes you just feels weird. You know, so like I said, you kind of have to for yourself figure out, and even then, because I bought the monk fruit from Costco before, and it doesn't dissolve well, the granulated. So so then it's kind of like you're also looking for what kind of texture you want something in. So often I get the powdered swerve, because the powdered swerve, you can kind of mix into anything and it'll disappear. So you don't end up with kind of stuff being grainy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just stick my monk fruit in the blender and make powder.
Yeah, you can do that too. Yeah, you can do that too. Yep.
Okay, when you hear people diagnosed with low sodium, you think, well, they need more salt, but that's not the case.
Actually, well, yes and no, it can be. It can be and it might not be. And I think I think salt is one of the things. There are several topics that there's the way that most of medicine gets taught about them, and then there's like another way of thinking about them. And because I listened to a whole book about salt, I just finished it last week, and he was talking about that. And in most cases, it was if you increase but there are some people who simply don't hold on to sodium. So there's also that issue. I mean, that's kind of one of the other pieces in there. But for the most part, we're eating a lot less salt in some cases today than we were in the past, unless of course you're eating tons of packaged food and then there's tons of salt in that because the flavor has to come from somewhere. So there tends to be a lot of salt and those kind of things. Yeah.
Anyhow, okay.
Salt's a huge topic, and like I said, I think salt's worth, if you're curious, it's worth spending some time looking and learning about, because we give salt a hard time about a lot of things when it doesn't really deserve it as much as some of the other stuff we eat. So what do you think when you see this? Yeah, right. I always say, I can't believe they call this butter. That's what I call it. But I don't show you the nutrition label on this, but there are so many ingredients in these things, ingredients that you can't pronounce. And one of the things about kind of the American food industry, this has got an American Heart Association label on it. And the truth of the matter is the American Heart Association, I think it's the Diabetic Association that have started to change their thinking on stuff. The Heart Association, they're sticking to their party line about things, and they're going to just continue to be wrong. So I'll just say that much about it. But, if you're going to eat it, eat this. This is good stuff.
Costco.
Yep.
Costco has, yep.
Yeah.
And you can make more of it or whatever, but this has flavor. A lot of the butter you buy in the grocery store doesn't really even have much flavor to it, but Kerrygold is expensive, but it tastes like something.
Inco's carrying it now. By the
cube. By the cube. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. So, I mean, that's probably true. Yeah. Right. Well, she's saying that there is some place you can buy Danish butter in town, but it's not on this end of town. And some of you maybe grew up in a place where you churned your own butter. That might be that. I mean, some of you did, some of you didn't. So that's kind of one of those things that, when you've tasted the real thing, it's kind of hard to taste the rest of the stuff. Butter gets a bad rap, saturated fat gets a bad rap. But some doctors are starting to come around to say saturated fat's not the one we have to watch out for as much as all the fake oils, which we're going to get to now. What do you think when you see this?
Plastic.
Yeah.
It's got the heart.
Yep, it's got a heart on it, doesn't it? Yep. No trans fat. No, it's cholesterol free. Taste the food, not the oil. If you're on the fence about these kind of oils at all, this is the only story I'll tell you about them. When these were developed, they were developed as oil for machinery. And somebody along the way realized that if you add a deodorizer to it, it loses the smell and people will eat it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, kind of once you know,
Ew.
it's kind of like, yeah.
What-
So,
What
so
is it?
yeah, go ahead.
What is a canola?
Yeah, what is a canola? Yeah.
I
Um,
don't-
yeah, anything. So canola oil, vegetable oil, safflower. I mean, there's a bunch of names that they use. Crisco is kind of in that same thing. The other part about all of these oils is that these are all high in linoleic acid, which we don't want lots of, and they're also high in omega-6s. And you want more omega-3s in your life and less omega-6s. So omega-3s would be your seafoods. Grass-fed beef has omega-3s.
Flaxseed.
There's other stuff that has omega-3s. Yeah, flaxseed, right. So there's other things that have omega-3s. Part of the problem in America, well, in the world today, most of us, our omega-3 to omega-6 ratio is so far out of whack because we eat so much omega-6. Seed oil. I mean, this is why you think of like McDonald's. I don't know if you've ever been in the McDonald's drive-through when the pumper truck comes and fills them up with oil. There's like this truck that comes and like suck out like all these gallons of oil, and then they push all these gallons of oil back in. And this is why they love this stuff, is because you can use it over and over and over and over again, and you just can keep using it. And so they use it for, a week or a couple weeks, and then they pump it all out and they pump in the new stuff and they start over again. And there are probably some of you that are old enough that you actually got to eat French fries at McDonald's that were fried in tallow. Because they used to fry all their fries in tallow until they realized that's expensive and the seed oils were cheaper. And so they switched to seed oils. So
We need fries.
you can't remember that far back. It's probably one of those things that's not like they told you they changed. You would have had to almost know that they changed. So what do you think when you see these things?
Lard, I grew up on it.
Yeah.
My grandmother.
When I see lard, I think of my grandma because she always fried her donuts in lard. And so when I make my grandma's donut recipe, I fry them in lard.
Yeah, those things are real good,
Not
by
very
the way.
often. They are really good. The other thing, I was thinking about my grandma's donuts the other day, which is probably not safe. But, the one thing that so many people, when they try my grandma's donuts, is that they say they need sugar. Like they need sugar. Because my grandma's using the old recipe where there's not a lot of sugar in her batches of donuts. So they're not real sweet. Because that's how she learned to make them. That's how she got used to making them. I've made them for like so many people in different groups, and they're like, oh, they need powdered sugar, they need this, or they need. And it's like, well, one, don't tell me what my grandma's donuts need because they're perfect the way they are. And two, that's a taste thing. Yeah.
All my neighbors and family come here. They say, can't you buy bread without sugar in it?
Yeah.
It's all filled with sugar.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in Denmark, you don't put
Right.
sugar in bread unless it's cake.
Right. Yeah. So, most of our bread in America has sugar in it and tastes sweet. And we're addicted to sugar in America. That's a big part of it. These are, I'll tell you about all of these things are safe to cook with, and they're not going to kill you, even though you might have been told different. Lard, some people get worried about lard because it is high hydrogenated. But the hydrogenation process they use on lard isn't the same as the hydrogenation process they use on oil. It's a different process.
Yeah.
So, and then there's coconut oil hiding behind on my screen, it's hiding behind all of your lovely faces. Coconut oil is okay to eat as well. Yep, avocado oil is good. Your olive oil is good. Olive oil is one of those tricky ones. They've done some tests on that because some companies cut their olive oil with other stuff. Although it seems like Costco's oil is pretty clean. The people who test it have said that. They said it's actually pretty good oil. But there are other places where they often will cut it with some of these cheaper seed oils just to save money because olive oil is expensive. So, Yeah. So I would probably, what I would guarantee you is that most of your grandmas, some of your parents, you know, they would have cooked with this kind of stuff. They would have done most of their cooking in this kind of stuff. And they would have kept the fat from anything they had cooked at one meal to use at another meal. It just would have been part of the process. So yeah, exactly. I mean, we're not that far removed from kind of those days. This is this I think is one of those eye-opening kind of graphics. We don't realize how much sugar is in stuff. You know, bananas, a lot of people call fruit nature's candy. And bananas have gone kind of off. If you've ever eaten a plantain is what a banana is more like what a banana is supposed to be like. It's not supposed to be so sweet, and it's more fibrous, and you got to cook it to make it taste like something. Our bananas today have been made to the point that you could eat a candy bar, because you can have 49 M&Ms or a banana. I mean, depending on the day, you know, you might decide. And I think, well, yeah, I mean, my doctor's office has like different kinds of soft drinks and whatnot with little packets of sugar underneath it to show you the equivalency of sugar. But, you know, the one thing on here, and this is one of the things that a lot of people don't understand is, you know, if you're drinking fruit juice, just the amount of sugar, and it's not just that there's sugar in fruit juice, it's the fructose as well. Your liver has to process fructose. So if you've heard of anybody, or if your doctor's ever said to you that you have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, that's often caused by fructose. Too much fructose in your diet, and your liver starts getting fat. It's the same thing that happens to an alcoholic, because in their case, you know, your liver has to process alcohol. So here's a rabbit hole for the day. Here, learn something else. So when you drink alcohol, your body has to process alcohol first. It can't do anything else until it's processed the alcohol, and then it can move on to processing whatever food you ate. So if you ate a big steak dinner and you drank a bunch of alcohol with it, your body's not going to do anything with that food until it processes all the alcohol, because it has to do that first. It's a toxin. Your body's trying to get rid of it, and then it will move on to digesting anything else. So if you've ever done that, where you've gone out to dinner, had a few too many drinks, and then slept awful the whole night, the reason for that is because you never got your food digested, but by the time you tried to go to sleep. So
Can't hear him.
oh,
Alcohol with the meal.
that alcohol helps with digestion. I think that's one of those marketing tricks.
Yeah.
Doesn't mind.
Yeah, I think that's a marketing trick. But this graphic I think is important for us to realize, because, you know, we wonder sometimes when kids can't sit still in school, and if you see what a school breakfast is, it's going to be a bagel, and it's going to be a banana, and it's going to be some juice, and then you're going to ask them to sit still in their chair after they've consumed all that sugar. You know, when you could have given them 250 M&Ms and sent them on their way. And, you know, I think one of the interesting things about that as well, my cousin's a year younger than me. He was born on my birthday when I was 1 year old. And when he was a kid, he had ADHD really bad. And they knew that the best way to control his ADHD, because they didn't really have medicine for it, is that they cut all the sugar out of his diet. You know, they didn't feed him sugar for breakfast. They didn't give him sugar very often. And that helped to control the ADHD. And it's like somewhere in the meantime, we forgot, which we've done with a lot of things. We kind of forget the natural solution to things. And instead we rely on medication to do what just removing some of the stuff out of the diet can do. Now, the next slide will lead us into a different conversation. I put this up just because of the previous slide. So you have to run or walk the length of one football field to burn off the calories of each plain M&M you eat.
Ooh.
We're going to get to why I don't care about that slide anymore, but I had to put it in there just because I showed you that slide before it. So Okay. So what do you know about calories? You know about calories? Too many makes you fat. Okay. What else do you know about calories? You need a certain amount every day. Okay. What else do you know about calories?
Counting calories is really hard and it doesn't really work.
Counting calories is really hard and it doesn't really work. Amen, sister. Yes.
3,500 calories.
Oh yeah, 3,500 calories is equal to a pound. Yep. Okay. Yep. I've heard that. Okay. What else do you know about calories?
What do you know? Calories.
All food has calories. Okay. Yep. That's true.
Good calories and bad calories.
Oh, good calories and bad calories. Now you're not telling you're going to tell me that not all calories are the same. Okay. That's sarcasm in my voice. If you can't pick it up, that's. The scary thing is when people don't pick up on my sarcasm and then they think I'm being serious, and then that's bad. So I'll qualify my sarcasm when I need to. Yeah. So calories, and if you've ever gone to the doctor and the doctor has said to you, your issue is you simply need to eat less and move more. You ever heard that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that leads to this question. What do you think contributes more to weight gain or loss? Calories or hormones?
Hormones.
I'd say hormones.
Yeah. So I would say the correct answer to this question is hormones. And actually, so this leads back to Hannah's question last week of one of the things that I learned in the book, The Obesity Code, that I kind of never realized before that. When you think about it, there's lots of people that subscribe to the idea that, your body is a simple machine. You need so many calories in each day. As long as you get so many calories out each day, you're either going to stay the same, gain weight, or lose weight, right? As if somehow we're a car engine. But even if you own a car, you know that if you drive a tank of gas around town, you get a lot less gas mileage than you do if you drive out on the highway, right? So even if we use that as an image, we know that it doesn't work because our car gets different gas mileage based on how we're driving it or where we're driving it or any of those kind of things. It's simply the idea of calories and our human body doesn't really work as nice and cleanly as some would like to say. The thing about exercise, and that's why I said that other slide about walking or running 100 yards to burn off an M&M. If you want to try that, that's fine, but you can't outrun a bad diet. You could when you were 16, you could when you were 18, but by the time you hit about 22, 23, it started not working. And it's only gotten worse since. And that's because our hormones start to change and our ability to simply move enough to burn off calories doesn't work anymore. So just kind of some basics about that is there's a ton of hormones that regulate whether we're gaining weight, losing weight, how we're living in the world. So the biggest one that we all know about is insulin, right? You all know insulin. Insulin, and here's the thing, and here's one of the most important things about every hormone. Every hormone we have is neither good or bad. It's simply a hormone that we have. What's good or bad about those hormones are how much of the time you've got them turned on or off. All of our hormones are meant to be turned on for a time being, and then they shut off. You eat a meal, you have some carbohydrates in it, you have some protein in it, your pancreas shoots out some insulin, it covers what you ate. You stop eating, you don't eat for several hours, your insulin level comes back down, and everything works the way it's supposed to. Now, one of the things with insulin that we've done in our world is, how many of you have ever had a doctor tell you you need to eat at least 6 times a day because you got to keep the fire fueled? You ever heard that? Some of you have and some of you haven't, but that's one of those favorite things that some doctors say is, well, you got to eat 6 times a day because you got to keep the fire fueled. And all you're doing is you're keeping your insulin high for however many hours it takes you to ingest those 6 meals, and you're not giving your body the break in between it. So what happens when your body has too much insulin around? Insulin is a growth hormone. Insulin is what gets you to store fat. Like I said, insulin's good because you need it. If you're a type 1 diabetic, you don't make insulin. You have to shoot insulin, or you have to take insulin of some sort, or else you're going to die. Insulin is an important part of your body. But what we have a problem with in our world is that we eat so many carbohydrates, we eat so much sugar that our insulin just stays skyrocketing all the time. And what happens when your insulin keeps being turned on all the time is you start storing fat in your cells. You start storing fat in your body, depending on, and this is another piece, and I'll hit on this later. But kind of every person has a threshold at which they can manage that insulin level, that fat level. And once they can't manage it anymore, that's when stuff starts going haywire. And what's interesting about this is it's different culturally. So often what you'll see is people from India, sometimes people from Japan, China, some of those places where they won't look fat on the outside, but they're actually very fat and unhealthy on the inside. And it's because their own personal fat threshold is such that they don't show fat on the outside. I think a lot of us, because we lived in northern climates, it was okay to have fat on the outside to keep you warm in the wintertime. So we're good at that. But people who didn't necessarily have that, I don't know if that's the reason, but other people don't have that same adaptation. So then they have to store that fat internally. The thing for all of us is that when you filled up your fat cells kind of to the point that you can hold them, then you start shoving fat in between your organs. And that's when it gets really dangerous. That's visceral fat. And that's the bad fat. You don't want to do that. And all that ends up being regulated by hormones. So a couple other hormones that are just kind of important. Cortisol. You've all heard of cortisol, right?
Mm-mm.
Cortisol is a stress hormone. So if you're a fight or flight moment, you're going to have cortisol shooting through your body. Cortisol is actually, though, often also, if you get a really good night's sleep and when you wake up in the morning and you feel like hitting the floor and get going, that's actually cortisol that helps with that. You get a little cortisol boost right before you wake up in the morning, because it's a good thing. If you think about it from kind of the longer range of things, if you had to get up in the morning, find water, find food, find whatever, your body had to figure out a way to get you out of bed. In our world today, and I can be this way myself, is all I have to do is make it to the coffee pot and then I'm fine for the rest of the morning. Because we kind of cheat and we use caffeine to kind of do what our natural hormones can do. So if you're not getting enough sleep, then you're often not going to get that hormone rise in the morning that will help you to then feel refreshed, awake as you get out of bed in the morning. So cortisol is one of those things like so anybody will say, well, if you're under a lot of stress, you have a lot of cortisol, that's bad because it's turned on all the time. Cortisol, like every other hormone, is meant to come on and turn off, come on and turn off. And so then whatever you can do to kind of help your body turn off these kind of processes, in a sense, the healthier you get. And anybody knows that you get a couple bad nights of sleep and you just start to feel worse. It just kind of compounds on you until sometimes it can take a couple weeks to turn it around, even if you have that happen. So that's why sleep's important. So don't skimp on the sleep. But I mean, I won't say that calories have no place, because they do mean something. They just don't mean as much as we've made it out to be. And the other part, the hard part about calories is there are so many variables that go into it, that it's really hard how in the world are you ever going to know how many calories exactly you were supposed to eat on any given day? I mean, it's an impossible task, because even when you read a food label is only an average of so many samples of a product, because they're not all the same. So if you ever bought 100-calorie packs because you thought you were getting 100 calories every time, you were lied to, because there's not always the same amount in every one of them. Okay, it's just that's the average of however many of them, and that's what gets put on the label. So right there, you already are off. So it's much, in my opinion, it's much more important that you figure out how you regulate hormones over how you count calories. And one of the realities of this, and I'll just say this, and the realities of this is guys always lose weight faster than women. It's a natural process. We have hormones that help us with that. And once you're a postmenopausal woman, then losing weight gets even harder because you have less hormones to help you in that process. Doesn't mean it's impossible, just means it's harder. And that's just a reality. And so it's kind of, I just would rather tell you what the reality is than to kind of say, oh yeah, it's all the same for everybody. And age has a lot to do with that, and everything else. What we don't recognize is that when some of these hormones are out of place, then all the other hormones can be out of place. If you look at, kind of across society, the issues with infertility have gone way up. A lot of that is because our base hormones are bad. So our body is like, why would I want to reproduce in this environment? Because I don't see this being a good environment. And so body doesn't work. Body doesn't produce the hormones needed to create life in some cases. So that there's kind of a whole bunch of stuff that you can learn about this. I'm not going to tell you everything because I don't know everything. And I can't even tell you everything I've forgotten about what I've learned because there's just so much of it. But the important thing for yourself is to realize that whatever hormones that you have and that you need, you want them to be turning on and off.
Are you listening?
That's a natural part of how life works. Okay. Any questions about that? I could try to.
I do. Well, what do you do to enhance better sleep?
What do you do to enhance better sleep? There's a lot of stuff you can do that you can try. The biggest one is a lot of us drink too much caffeine. And I kind of have learned, for myself, I don't drink caffeine after noon. Sometimes I'll push it till 2 o'clock, but that's about as far as I'll push it. Because if I go any farther than that, I know my sleep's going to suffer. So caffeine, depending on the person, caffeine can have a really long half-life. So if you're somebody who's really sensitive to caffeine, you could drink a cup at 8 o'clock in the morning and you could still be feeling it at 12 o'clock at night. If you're somebody who's really sensitive to it. So this is why it's important that you kind of figure out your body, like how do I react to things? So caffeine would be one of them. Another one is to not eat too close to bedtime. This is another thing that we tend to break. Is, you're sitting watching TV and you're thinking, oh, I could take a snack. And so it's 9, 10 o'clock and you're eating a snack and then you're going to go to bed in an hour. That disrupts your sleep because you want to be done digesting your food, or you want to be through that major part of your digestion before you go to bed, because that messes with your sleep process. For most of us, we get way too much light too close to bedtime. Some people have gone as far as there's blue light blocking glasses you can get that will kind of block all the blue light out of your different devices. If you think about it if you've ever sat around a fire, like a campfire, campfire has no blue light. A campfire has all yellows and oranges and kind of whatever. And you can sit in front of a campfire and you go straight to bed and it doesn't hurt anything because it doesn't mess with your hormones. It's natural. I mean, that's what we had light to live by until you went to bed at night, was a natural kind of light source. So now almost all of our lights, like the fluorescent lights in here, the lights from your television, it has a ton of blue light. Blue light is a light that wakes you up, not puts you to sleep. Blue light exposure, especially late at night, can really mess with your sleep. And that's the bad thing is a lot of people read from a Kindle that's backlit. And that can actually mess with your sleep if that's the last thing you're doing is reading from a backlit Kindle, because your blue light consumption then is higher than it should be. So that's another thing you can do. You know, doctors will often say, turn the TV off, you know, kind of whatever for a half an hour, at least a half an hour before you go to bed. I tend to break this rule all the time. I'll admit it. But, you know, I think that's part of the ways you can improve your sleep. Is just by that. Another thing, we tend to sleep with a room too hot. The cooler you can make your room, the better you'll sleep. It might take you a little bit to get used to it. Other countries, here's just a side story, but my sister was an exchange student in Germany, and in Germany, didn't matter what the temperature was outside, you left your bedroom window open at night. Your bedroom window was always open at night. And she said her host father looked at her one day and he says, you silly Americans, he says, you sleep in your own farts all night because you have the windows closed, you know. And that was his way of thinking about it. But I always thought that's funny. But at the same time, getting in fresh air, getting in cooler air can improve your sleep as well. So quite often we're sleeping too hot, and it doesn't allow us to get into as good a sleep. And I think one of the interesting things, if you've ever seen a story about it in Finland, they actually park babies outside the house. Like in the middle of the wintertime, they wrap them up, they put them outside and for their afternoon nap. And they just sit on the outside porch. In Denmark too, you know, and those kids take great naps. They're healthy, they're everything else because they're getting sunlight, they're getting daylight, and they're getting that cold air, which is allowing them to sleep better. And there's like some of these things, but in America, I always say we think we're smarter than God. And so that sometimes we try to do things that, we just try to do things that get us.
We'd call the CSD on our neighbor probably.
Well, we would. If you left your kid on a porch today, yes, Child Protective Services would be at your house.
Because I put my kids outside and then they take them back in.
Yeah.
They slept for a couple hours.
Yeah. Yeah. People will look at you like you're strange in America if you leave your kid outside. Yes. You know, so nutrition labels. We're almost at an hour already. I've been talking about this for a long time. Just a couple of things, you know, obviously it says calories. Serving size, you should always pay attention to because, you know, you never know. You might think, oh, I can eat the whole package and it's 5 servings or something crazy. When you get to carbohydrates, some people can do net carbs. Some people have to do total carbs. And that's really, that depends on you. And I'll even say that from the standpoint, and I have a slide that just says, what's your carbohydrate threshold? Everybody has a carbohydrate threshold, just like you have a fat threshold. For some people, they have to keep their carbohydrates super low or they'll gain weight, not feel good, kind of all things. Other people, they can be pretty high flexible on their carbohydrates and they can do okay. So you once again, that's kind of something you have to figure out for yourself. I think sometimes this is where married life can be hard for people because you might have one person who has a really high carb tolerance and one that has a really low carb tolerance. And it seems to be the one with the low carb tolerance gets really jealous of the one with a high carb tolerance. Maybe. Just because they get away with eating stuff, you know, that you can't eat or whatever. And you've all heard those conversations at some point in your life, you know, between two people. So if you're doing net carbs, it's your total carbs minus fiber. I just think it's better to go total carbs, especially if you're trying to lose weight, you're trying to get things under control, go total carbs. I try to stay under 20. I can be a little more flexible with that now, but when I was kind of going through the most weight loss, I was trying to be under 20 carbs a day, which is not very much. So
Do you subtract the sugar alcohol too?
you know, I tend not to. I kind of just let it be what it is.
Yeah.
But I don't eat a lot of desserts anymore. I do once in a while. And if I'm going to have one, I just don't worry about it that day. Like, you know, Zach makes a really good cheesecake. If Zach's made cheesecake, I'm going to eat a piece of cheesecake. I'm not going to worry about it. I know that it's going to be a little higher carb than what I normally eat, but it's not full of sugar because I know how he made it. So I'm not going to worry about it. So, but I'm at a point where I can do that. I couldn't do that before, but I'm at a point now I can do that. I think one of the interesting things, and this is something I may not get to, but we'll just see, is protein. And I think I actually heard this. I think I actually heard this on Peter's podcast recently. But protein is kind of on a food label is kind of a misnomer, because protein is made up of a lot of different amino acids. There's 8 or 9 essential amino acids, and not all proteins created the same. And every day you need all 9 of those. It's 8 or 9 essential proteins to have healthy musculature and everything else. And when the label says protein, you have no idea what amino acids are present in that protein. And this is where some of the argument gets made sometimes between plant proteins and protein from meat. Protein from meat tends to be a more complete protein. It's got more of the amino acid profile. And sometimes what they don't tell you about protein in a vegetable is they'll say, oh, broccoli's got so much protein in it. Yes, if you eat 2.5 pounds of it. And how many people are going to sit down and eat 2.5 pounds of broccoli to get whatever that magic number is? So, so this is one of those tricky places where if you're going to be vegetarian, or if you're going to go even farther and be vegan, if you're going to be vegan, you're going to supplement. You have to supplement because there's just some amino acids you can't get from plant material. And you even some to get all the protein, all the amino acids you're supposed to get from meat protein, you even have to kind of eat around a few different things to make sure you're kind of getting a balance of everything. And some of that, I think some of that too is your own personal, you kind of have a personal tolerance for that. Like some people like lots of seafood and that's like just makes them feel better. Some people don't need to eat a lot of seafood and they just eat a lot of beef or, whatever it might be. So like I said, I'm kind of more of people figuring out for themselves what makes you feel good. One of the things, if you can work on getting the inflammation down in your body, you can actually start to then feel the signals of what you're eating. And you'll kind of know, oh, I ate that and I don't feel as good. Or, oh, I ate that and, oh, I feel really good. Or you get partway through the day and you're like, oh, I'm just craving whatever. And those are actually good signs at some point that things are working the way they're supposed to. Now, we've all had cravings, but most of the time it's cravings for sugar of some sort. And the issue that a lot of us have, and the issue that I would have said I would have had is that we're overweight, but we're underfed. Like we're carrying around all this extra weight, but we aren't actually bringing in the nutrients our body needs to feed us and keep us thriving. So once you so what happens is then your body will drive you to keep eating because it's saying, okay, well, you just ate a whole pizza, but you didn't give me any of the nutrients I wanted. So I'm going to send you back to the cupboard and see if you can find something else that's going to give me the nutrients I want. And that's part of the danger of that whole process. And if you eat something that's got the nutrient profile that you need, you'll be full longer. You'll be more satisfied. You'll feel satiety. That's one of the things a lot of Americans don't even know what that feels like. The sense of feeling full, but not like I feel sick full because I ate so much food. I mean, we all know what that feels like. But satiety is a whole different thing. The satiety is simply when your body's kind of received the nutrients it needed, it'll shut things down. You've got a hormone that will actually tell you, I don't want any more food. So once again, a hormone that tells you your body what it is. It's not calories. You didn't hit a certain number of calories. It's that your body says everything's okay. I'm going to send the hormone out now to say stop eating. So. And I always forget because it's ghrelin and leptin, and I think ghrelin is what causes hunger. Leptin is what makes you feel full. I think I always get those confused, but those are the 2 hormones that control those 2 processes. But I can be wrong too. So, okay. So does that make some sense? And so, I mean, you know, you can be a vegetarian and still get, you just have to eat enough eggs. You have to eat certain dairy. You can get your full amino acid profile. Like I said, if you're a vegan, you're going to supplement because you're not going to get some of the nutrients you need. It's a reality. Trust me, you can Google it and they'll show you tons of charts saying, oh, if you eat these things on a vegan diet, you'll get all the amino acids you need. But that doesn't mean it's true. Just because it's a chart on Google doesn't mean it's true. The important lesson, like this one right here. There's lots of things wrong with this graphic, but they show it online all the time that somehow broccoli has more protein than beef, which isn't true. You know, but even if you think about that, 100 calories of beef compared to 100 calories of broccoli, like by volume, what are you talking about? I mean, that's a lot. That's a huge difference in volume. Yeah. You know, and when you're talking about satiety and, you know, I know eggs get a bad rap, and we can talk about kind of some of the science and how that all works, but eggs get a bad rap. But, you know, and a large egg is 70 calories. And the truth of the matter is, depending on who you are, you can only eat so many eggs, you're going to feel full. It's going to trigger your satiety signal to say, I don't want to eat anymore. And you're going to be full for several hours after that. And, you know, so there are ways that you can kind of start to learn some of those, kind of how to trigger those things in your body, just by what you eat. What's important, you know, I think one of the things that they often say is you should always start your meal with protein. Eat your carbs last, because it will actually mean you'll get less of a or less of a glucose response to the carbs. So if you eat your protein first, then you kind of get a little bit less of a reaction, in a sense, to the carbs you might eat. I don't think that means you should eat your steak and then eat a loaf of bread to follow. I don't think it quite means that, but you know, it's just, you know, there's little things. If you're going to eat some carbs, there's precise, there's good ways to do it. That can kind of help. The other thing about the protein on a label, the other thing that they don't tell you is, so say whatever vegetable it is has so many grams of protein, that's total grams of protein. That doesn't mean your body can actually use those grams of protein. It doesn't mean they're actually bioavailable grams of protein. So, you know, it even shows it here, you know, your grams of protein in beef are going to be way more bioavailable than the grams of protein in the vegetable. The vegetable might be in the 40%, 50% range, where the beef is going to be 100%. You're going to get 100% of the protein as long as you don't overcook it. I learned that the other day. If you're somebody who likes your steak well done, you're shortchanging yourself the protein because your body can't break it down. You're better off eating it a little on the rarer side. So that's not rare, but a little on the rarer side, not beef. Yeah. But if you get all the way to well, you can't actually digest all the protein. So yeah, I just learned that the other day. I was like, well, I've never heard that before. So, yeah. So this is, I mean, these are essential amino acids. That's kind of more science than I even wanted to get into. I just finally found one. I went, oh, I can deal with that slide. So, you know, depending on the food, it's going to have different levels of any of these things. Tryptophan's an interesting one. Your body actually needs tryptophan because that's actually part of what helps you go to sleep at night. So we always, you know, say turkey has tryptophan. That's the joke. You know, you fall asleep after Thanksgiving dinner. We blame it on the turkey. Well, it probably was the stuffing and the cranberries and all the carbohydrates you ate with the turkey that actually caused your blood sugar to drop and you get tired and want to sleep. But tryptophan is actually one of those things that helps your body to relax and go to sleep at night. So it's actually it's another one of those things you need. I mean, there is actually tryptophan in turkey. I haven't. This is like another level of stuff that I haven't quite gotten to yet. Yeah. Yeah.
try to buy a turkey leg.
Yeah, some turkey jerky or something. No, I don't know. Go to bed with a turkey leg. Yeah, I don't recommend that. No, so I mean, I think these are the amino acids are important to know about because if you're going to make a choice, like I said, to be vegetarian or to move towards being vegan, you have to be really smart about it because you need to be making sure you're getting all of the protein. The last thing I want to say about protein, because I know I've gone past an hour here at this point, but is most of us are not getting enough protein in general. Unless for some reason your doctor has said to you have some kidney damage, then you might have to moderate your protein. But if your kidneys are working fine, most of us aren't getting enough protein. And what happens when you don't get enough protein is that you start to lose muscle tone. You need a certain amount of protein every day just to keep the muscle tone you have up. It's one of the reasons why as we get older, we lose muscle tone is because actually as you get older, your protein requirement goes up, not down. You would think you're shrinking or whatever, it would go down, but it actually goes up. And I think part of that's probably just your body's ability to process it as well. So quite often, one of the signs of health, and this is my example. If you want to see somebody who's in their 90s, who is, I would consider one of the healthiest people I know, is you watch Martin Tyker walk. And there's something, and what you see about when Martin Tyker walks, he walks with nice long strides, he walks with a purpose, and he looks very secure and stable on his feet. And I would guess that Martin's a pretty healthy guy, just based on how he walks. What happens as we get older, our muscle tone goes down, we become less secure kind of in our own walking, we tend to shorten our stride, we often start to rock back and forth a little bit when we walk, and that actually increases our chances of falling and breaking something because of that change in stride. So that's my example. I'm not going to give you a bad example. I'm only going to give you the good example. I watch Martin walk and I'm like, I want to walk like Martin when I get to be his age. Because
Who is Martin?
Martin Tyker. Yeah. Martin Tyker.
Oh, okay.
Martin.
Martin, yes. Yeah. So, so the best sources of protein, in my opinion, come from meat. I tend to lean towards beef more than chicken, and that's just my own preference. I really don't eat chicken anymore. It does nothing for me. I eat it and I feel hungry in a couple hours. I really do. I just have no purpose for chicken in my life anymore. I'll eat pork once in a while, but I don't even get too excited about pork. I eat a lot of beef. That's just where I am right now. And I'll tell you in my own personal thing, right now I've actually been trying to increase the amount of protein I'm eating because I'm trying to put a little more muscle on at this age so that I can hopefully carry it into later life. So I'm trying to hit 180 grams of protein a day, which is a lot of protein.
Wow.
Yeah. But the average American eats 50. So if you figure your lean body mass is some percentage of your overall body weight, even if it was 70%, 50 grams is not enough. But that's what the average American eats. So the average American on any given day is not eating enough protein to support their lean muscle mass. And if you aren't supporting your lean muscle mass, then you're also not supporting your bone health, which all of those things kind of go together, which leads to the last thing that Sue had mentioned earlier before we got started, and is that if you do any kind of exercise, do weight-bearing exercise. Weight-bearing exercise will do the most for your muscles, will do the most for your bones, and will keep you going strong.
One question.
Yeah.
Could you show us who's there tonight?
Can I show you who's here tonight? Sure.
We don't know who's asking questions.
You know Nola's there, right? No, give me a second. I got to change cameras here. I want this one. Okay, so who's in the room.
3?
No, more than 3. Camera just can't show everybody.
Okay. I don't know who that is.
Stephanie Olson and Stephanie Olson over here.
Okay.
And Jill, is it Jill? Yes.
Jill Clark.
Jill Clark, yeah. Yes. So, yeah. So that's who's
Stephanie's
here.
working on Sunday, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I think that was a lot, right?
Yeah.
But hopefully maybe helpful. Like I said, a lot of what I want to do is I want to just try to start to pique your interest so that if you kind of go, oh, I want to learn more about that. For those of you in the room, I do have some books in the back of the room. I was going to show all of the rest of you a couple other resources. And if you need to go, you can go. I give you my blessing. I'm going on a little long here. I realize that. If you want to, if you're somebody who likes to watch movies, okay, here's some movies that I recommend. If you're in the room, there's a sheet in the back that has all these on it, so you don't have to write them down. This is the benefit of being in the room. There are different levels of kind of what they are. If you have Amazon Prime, you can watch these free on Prime. A couple of them you can watch free on Prime. So Fat, a documentary, has a few parts in it that are a little rough. So just be ready for that. But it's a good movie and you'll learn a lot. And actually Fat 2 is just kind of more of the footage that they shot when they shot Fat, a documentary, and they just released kind of more of that footage. If you want to learn more kind of about agriculture and some of those things, Sacred Cow is a really good movie. It's a fairly new movie. It came out just before Christmas, and it's really well shot and really well done. The fasting movie kind of just talks about fasting from a religious standpoint, from kind of what it does in relationship to your diet and some of those kind of things. So it's not a great movie, but it's okay. Fat Fiction's a pretty good movie as well. The Biggest Little Farm is like the biggest pipe dream that somebody got a lot of money to afford them the opportunity to do this. But they basically show how they restored the land on this one farm in this part of California that's basically surrounded by desert. And I mean, they spent a lot of money and they did a lot of work to it, but they basically have created a whole new ecosystem in a place that you would have thought could have only been sagebrush and desert. So it's a beautiful movie. But it's kind of not necessarily reality from the standpoint of most people don't have that kind of funding. And then there's some podcasts. So if you're somebody, I listen to podcasts when I drive around in my car. Low Carb MD podcast is really good. I'm giving Peter's podcast he does the Herd Mates Sodcast. So one of the things I like about Peter's podcast is he kind of hits the whole range. He does nutrition, he does agriculture, he does science. So you get to learn kind of a larger kind of range of stuff on his podcast. Diet Doctor podcast is good. I like Brett Sure enough that I only watch his on YouTube because they do such high quality videos. You can watch them on YouTube and they're good too. And the Sustainable Dish podcast, that's the person who was part of Sacred Cow. That's her podcast, and that's a good podcast as well. So those are just some. I mean, there's tons of them out there, but those are just some. And those are on that list back there too. So if you're somebody who likes to listen to podcasts, that's something you can do as well. Okay, I think that's enough for tonight. Yes. Yeah, so for those of you that aren't in the room, I printed out an article about bread, breaking from bread. It was in Modern Science. If you're in the room, you can pick one of those up at their back table too. If you want one, I can send one out to you. So just if you want to learn a little bit more about kind of bread and what it does. So I think since we prayed at the beginning, we're running late. I'm going to just say good night and thank you for coming tonight. And thank you for being part of this. Any questions before we go?
I just have one Are we going to talk about healthy BMI or weight range for age group or whatever?
We can talk about that. I've got some issues with just BMI in general, but we can talk about kind of how do you know kind of you're kind of doing what's optimal for you. Actually, Peter did a podcast, just released it. I think it was today. It's a really good podcast that he talks to somebody kind of about in the health and fitness kind of range of things that I thought was really good. Just talking about even at it's a man in his 50s, but what he was able to do to improve his own physical makeup, health and whatnot. And so I think that's some of that kind of stuff is good to listen to as well, just to kind of, because they kind of reinforce that the weight bearing exercise and he's got his own thing he talks about. But some of that kind of stuff is good. But yeah, we can talk about kind of how do you figure out healthy body composition. We can talk about that as we go too.
Cool.
Yeah, I just don't tend to hold the BMI too close as someone who's still considered overweight on BMI. So
my doctor told me to weigh my high school weight. So
well, I actually made it. I'm actually at my high school weight. I mean, that's the amazing thing. I'm actually at my high school weight, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything.
I'm 12 pounds less than my driver's license weight was pretty good.
I always say if you weigh less than your driver's license, you're doing really well, because we all lied when we filled out our driver's license. So.
For sure. Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Yep. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.
I wanted to leave. Here we go.